Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Breen, and I am on the Publicis Commerce marketing team, and it is my very great pleasure to welcome you to our webinar, Agentic Commerce Now, Part 2. We once again are kind of taking a risk by recording this discussion a few days in advance of when we're going to release it, given the speed of change that we've been experiencing out there. And you're going to hear some of that as we talk through the next hour. For instance, you're probably going to hear a few references to Rufus and see it on some of the slides we may have prepared, and we'll explain to you why that's an outdated concept in itself. A lot has changed since we held the first Agentic Commerce Now webinar about 6 months ago or so, back in November. There's been a lot of progress. There's been some shifts in strategy that kind of signal sideways moves. And I guess there's even been a couple of steps backwards in a few spots with a few companies. Overall, though, I think the greatest progress that's been made across the industry has been gaining some proper perspective. Back in November, everybody thought the commerce sky was falling and the bots were about to take over retail entirely. Now I think we've got a more rational and more pragmatic approach to what's happening in most cases, even though the pace of change seems to be getting even faster, if that's possible. We still don't have a lot of clarity on the future of agentic commerce, but we've got a more considered, thoughtful perspective on what should be happening in the short term, and a slightly better understanding of how we as commerce marketers should be responding. To tell you all about that, we've assembled a pretty diverse and exceptional team of thought leaders from across the Publicis Commerce ecosystem. They're diverse both in terms of the businesses that they're involved with and the subject matter expertise that they're going to provide. The way we've brought them together for this webinar is kind of an outward example of the collaborative, cross-functional work that we're doing internally on behalf of our clients, working closely together across agencies and across practices to develop the strategies, build the capabilities that will be needed to excel in agentic commerce. We've got 2 returnees from the last webinar and 2 new voices here tonight. I'm going to simply introduce them by name, title, and the role here today, and then we're going to let their subject matter expertise take center stage. In order of appearance, we've got Jason Goldberg, Chief Commerce Strategy Officer at Publicis Group. He's going to lay out the current landscape, where we are right now, how we got here, maybe a little bit about where we almost went but didn't, and where we might be heading next. We've then got Julia Miller, Group VP of Commerce Media for Mars United and Publicis Commerce. She's going to look at the big picture strategic direction that marketers need to be considering across the full agentic landscape. Then we'll have Tyler Rosten, Director of E-commerce at Saatchi X. He's going to take a deeper dive into principles and practices around vertical search engines. And if you're not familiar with that term, you will be soon. And then bringing us home at the end will be Ethan Goodman, President of Profitero Plus, who's going to validate the strategies that we've discussed up until that point by exploring some proprietary research that we recently conducted. Now, we built the presentation to answer many of the questions that we've been hearing internally from clients and retail partners. We're pretty confident we've got a good handle on what's top of mind for most organizations. We're going to wrap things up by asking the panel a few direct questions, some of the ones that we've been hearing over and over again from clients and partners. Because we're not live, obviously, we can't field any questions from you folks, but we're going to give you a way at the end to ask us any questions that you might have once we're done. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Hey, thanks so much, Peter. And just quick clarification, we are all in fact live. We're just not recording this live. So I wouldn't want anyone to think that they've figured out how to replace us with the agents quite yet. I'm sure it's coming soon for the next webinar. But I do want to jump right in. I want to remind everyone briefly about what we talked about last time and then move forward. From my perspective, the biggest threat of all of this agentic commerce is the impact it has on how people discover new products to buy, how they find new things and make purchase decisions. And so I call this the disruption of discovery. And so you can jump right into the next slide. And in fact, you can jump to the next slide. So as a reminder, for most of the history of retail, the way that people discovered products is they saw them on the shelf in a store. They had that Procter & Gamble first moment of truth. But increasingly, in the modern era, this in-store discovery has been augmented or even replaced in many cases by discovery before you ever get to the store. So if you go to the next slide, the much more common way that someone might pick a sunscreen today is from that social influencer on TikTok. But of course, what we're all here today to talk about is the disruption of this kind of discovery with this next kind of discovery. So if you go to the next slide, instead of, and I should have mentioned, by the way, that those influencers are getting quite prominent. That sunscreen expert that we met on TikTok is now doing Super Bowl ads for Kenvue. So very exciting stuff. But really what we're talking about is this next slide, which is the disruption of discovery by the robots. So instead of going to TikTok, instead of going to my local drugstore, I might just go to the robot and say, hey, robot, what's the best sunscreen for a 10-year-old on vacation in Hawaii, for example? And it's going to give us a really detailed set of objective results and propose 4 criteria that we ought to pick and propose 3 sunscreens that meet those criteria. But as savvy viewers of this webinar will know, this is the results that the robot would have given us like 7 months ago. So if we click to the next slide, we see the more common results we get today. Those product recommendations are replaced with product tiles. And if a customer clicks on one of those product tiles and you go to the next slide, you won't even have to pick a retailer. You won't have to make a purchase decision. It will take you right to a page that sends you to Walmart's product detail page in this case to enable you to buy the product without you ever having to do a comparison or select a retailer to fulfill the product, right? And this is this notion of agentic commerce. When we talked about this in the last webinar, we talked about the next logical progression from this, which sends you to Walmart, to this next thing that we call instant commerce, right? And of course, shortly after our webinar, ChatGPT did in fact launch instant commerce. But it didn't last very long. If you go to the next slide, a good friend of the show and my fellow podcast host, Scott Wingo, has kind of put together a spectrum of maturity in agentic commerce. And so he talks about, kind of no agentic commerce being level 0, level 1 being the robots can help you research a product, level 2 being they can help you find a particular product, level 3 being, will help you make purchases of the product on a retailer's website. And so that's what we just saw in that last example. Level 4 is advanced buying, which would include things like instant commerce. It would include things like multiple items in a single cart and using your affinity program and all these other things. And level 5 is the robot just fulfills the purchase and you never actually go shopping yourself. So when we did our last webinar, ChatGPT was kind of at this level 3, and we were all waiting to see them jump to level 4. And what's actually happened since the last webinar is they have jumped, but they jumped backwards to level 2. So they actually announced that they were turning off their instant commerce. And if you read their press releases, they'll tell you that was largely because there was slow customer adoption and the customers preferred to go to a retailer's website to buy that. There's a lot of controversy about, if that is in fact the full story and what some of the other reasons behind that change may have been. For purposes of this webinar, I don't think it's very important. But what you do need to know is that a week ago, Google made its announcements, and Google, who is also sort of in this same level 3 boat, announced instant checkout and very clearly demonstrated a lot of features that are part of this level 4. So what we have this week as we do this webinar live is we have ChatGPT moving back from level 3 to level 2, and we have Google moving from level 3 to level 4. And so, we're starting to have an opportunity for these kinds of experiences to have a pronounced effect on how people discover products and purchase new products. Now, if you go to the next slide, this is an example of Google's new capability. And what's interesting about it is it's multi-merchant cart. So you can have items in your cart from more than one vendor at the same time. You also can have an unlimited number of items in your cart from one vendor, which is a critical feature for e-commerce. And heretofore, none of the instant commerce pilots have supported multiple SKUs per purchase, much less multiple retailers per purchase. But what's also, to me, really interesting about the Google feature set that was announced is they've added things like promotions in the cart. Here, they're in this middle frame, they're showing you that it's the lowest price that they've seen in 30 days for this item that you're about to buy. And in the last example, they're looking at the items in your cart and telling you there may be a compatibility problem between these two items you're buying from Best Buy. So the agentic features are moving from just helping you discover products to really helping you successfully purchase and own products, which is sort of an exciting evolution of the space, and it's going to have a pronounced impact on customer adoption and how we all have to think about all this. So if you go to the next slide, what we're moving towards, that level 5 that Scott described, that's not, hey robot, order more peanut butter for my kid's lunch. That's, hey robot, never let me run out of ingredients for my kid's lunch again. And think about what that means. In my case, that means the robot's going to know that my son goes to Chicago public schools and what the lunch schedule is. And they're going to know what our family vacation plans are and when we won't need lunch. And they're going to know where we buy our groceries. And they're going to look at our grocery purchases and see that, in fact, my kid doesn't even eat peanut butter, that my kid only eats pirate booty. And so they're going to make sure that my pantry never runs out of pirate booty again. And so this is this idea of moving to zero-click commerce. If you go to the next slide, sort of a fun fact, when I launched my first e-commerce site back in 1994, it took us 22 clicks to buy something. And I spent most of my career, along with a bunch of my smart colleagues here at Publicis, getting our 22 clicks down to 4 clicks. Honestly, I thought that might be what was on my tombstone. Here lies Jason Retail Geek Goldberg. He got us down to 4 clicks. And then the bastards invented 1 click. Many of you will know why I'm so bitter about 1 click. The reason is because it still takes 4 clicks to do a 1-click checkout. And it's great branding, and I really wish I had thought of it. But we're now talking about this zero-click idea. And what's funny is back in 1994, when we launched that first e-commerce site, I got an angry call from Visa. And they said, hey, Jason, you're violating the terms and conditions of our merchant agreement with you. You are charging a customer's credit card, but the customer is not in front of you with the credit card. You, in fact, have never seen the customer's credit card. That's what we call a card not present transaction, and it's against our terms and conditions. You can't do it. So we all had to negotiate how to take credit cards when the credit card wasn't present. And we all had to invent this new payment standard called card not present transactions. Today, they're incredibly common, and we do them billions of times a day. But those same those same vendors, those same payment providers are now having these same conversations, but instead of card not present, they're now trying to solve for human not present. What happens when something gets ordered and a human isn't involved in the transaction? How do we deal with returns? How do we deal with fraud? If you go to the next slide, in the same week, we saw conflicting announcements. We saw Target updating their terms and conditions to make it very clear that you are personally responsible for any action an agent takes on their website. Your bot, your responsibility is sort of the position they've taken. And that same week, American Express announced that they want to be the most trusted payment provider in the world, and that they're going to indemnify customers for any mistaken purchases made by bots on their behalf. So this stuff is still playing out. You can expect it to be a really rapidly evolving space as we all try to figure out the payment infrastructure and architecture to drive this new future of agentic commerce. But equally interesting, if you go to the next slide, is that so far the traction has all been in what we would call vertical agents. These are agents that are owned by the robots. So this is like Sparky in the case of Walmart, and what most of you would have called Rufus in the case of Amazon. And both of these retailers told us over holidays that they were hugely successful, that they were used by 50% of mobile app users in Walmart's case, or 60% of Black Friday shoppers in Amazon's case. And in Amazon's case, the conversion rate was 60% better. In Walmart's case, the carts were 35% larger. And so lots of customers over holiday used these vertical agents and had a really good outcome. And both of these retailers and many other retailers are heavily leaning in to educating customers about these vertical agents. Now, if you go to the next slide, the fear that these retailers have is that you'll never get to the retailer and never use their agent. That instead, you'll use a general purpose agent that will help you with your shopping, and you'll never choose a retailer. And so we call those agents horizontal agents. That's the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Perplexities, the Geminis of the world. And there's a great fear if you're a vertical retailer that you could be disintermediated by these horizontal retailers. And if you listen to the earnings calls, for example, Amazon's earnings calls, Andy Jassy spent almost his entire time that he talked about retail talking about why Amazon's vertical agent is superior to a horizontal agent. And he would quickly tell you that the Amazon agent knows a lot more about your purchase intent. It knows what you've bought. It knows what you didn't buy. It knows what you returned. Most importantly, Amazon has great product data on 1 billion products. And so this huge commerce advantage he feels allows vertical agents to give a much better experience. The horizontal agents, and if you listen to Sundar talk about instant checkout at Google's announcement last week, would tell you, we know more about your whole life. We know what medical concerns you have that you might need to purchase a product for. We know what your vacation plans are. We know what your college savings plans are. And we can use all of that context of your life to give you a better shopping experience. And the bet for the horizontal agents is they can learn the purchase intent more easily than the Amazon vertical agents can learn all of the life context that the horizontal agents have. So this is this great battle that's fighting right now in agentic commerce. And if you go to the next slide, you can I sort of lay this out for you. You can kind of see the advantages and the strengths and weaknesses of the horizontal versus the vertical agents. What's super interesting is that Amazon announced 2 weeks ago that, hey, we're retiring Rufus as a brand, and we're replacing it with Alexa Plus. That's kind of promoting a beta to a full release product. They at the same time said, and we're going to make it way more ubiquitous in your life. So she's not just going to exist as a widget on the bottom of the product detail page. She's going to be in the search engine. So anytime you type a prompt, if we realize you're asking her a question and not just doing a traditional search, we'll give you an agentic answer. And also we'll enable all of these instant commerce features across all of our surfaces, including all of those millions of hardware devices that we have installed in people's homes that answer questions for our kids, that do our home automation, that play our music, that do all these other things for us. And so you can imagine part of Amazon's strategy is to make their agent both a vertical and a horizontal agent. So that's a real interesting evolution we're seeing in this play. Of course, another conversation that comes up all the time, if you go to the next slide, and sorry, this was just the announcement where we mentioned that Alexa had been promoted and that was becoming more of a horizontal agent. If you go to the next slide, the other challenge is how everybody's going to monetize this, right? And all these companies need to make money. In many cases, they have huge legacy revenue streams to protect, like Meta or Google or Amazon. Or in the cases of like a ChatGPT or an Anthropic, they have a huge valuation they have to justify, right? And so obviously the question of can we sell ads in these platforms is coming up more and more. And the conflict is that these platforms have to be trusted to be used by users. And early on, we've seen that intrinsically, these agents have a lot of trust. There's evidence in many circles that customers trust the medical advice of the agent more than they do a credentialed physician with a white coat, right? But the question is, as they start adding ads to these platforms, will customers still trust them as much, right? And so, we saw early on OpenAI make, a strong stance that we're going to test some ads, but we're going to do it in a really transparent way. It's always going to be super obvious that it's an ad. We're never going to change or impact our prompt results based on any monetization strategy. But I've got to be honest, when you look at the pilot ads that ChatGPT has in the wild, it's hard to reconcile that, right? And so, here I have a picture of an ad where a customer made a prompt asking for running shorts. And one of the the results that ChatGPT gave for running shorts is a sponsored listing from Joseph A. Banks, which makes lovely shorts, but they're not running shorts. And so these kinds of things have the potential to erode this early trust that these agents have inherited. So this is going to be a super interesting thing to watch. And then, just yesterday, if you go to the next slide, as we're recording this webinar, we've seen new ads in the wild from Google. And again, these ads are not off to the side. These are embedded results right in the middle of the prompt results. And so it's differentiated. It has this red box around it. But we can see the line between content and monetized content is getting blurrier and blurrier, and it's likely to continue for the foreseeable future. So one of the really big questions here is which platforms will earn trust, which platforms will be able to keep trust, which platforms will be able to generate significant revenue via monetizations, which ones will not, and how will they generate that monetization revenue while still protecting the consumer trust. So this is the very early days for all this, but this is one of the key things we're following as we talk about the potential winners and losers in all this space. If you go to the next slide, the final thing I want to sort of highlight here is the incredible pace of change that we're all trying to deal with. The thing that's different to me about agentic commerce than any of the other trends in our lifetime, you think about e-commerce back in the 90s, or mobile commerce in the mid-2000s, or social commerce when Facebook first started selling products in 2014. And we had a long time to react to each of those, right? So again, 30 years after e-commerce launched, it still had 10% penetration. It took 8 years for mobile to get to 50% of commerce. Social commerce is still a very small fraction of all commerce. So we had time to react to all of those things. But if you think about how fast agentic is getting adopted, it's a completely different ballgame. We have much less time. So go to the next slide. The only way to really show it is in context with other technology platforms. So you'll remember when Twitter launched, it took 2 years for Twitter to get to 1 million users. It took Facebook about 10 months to get to 1 million users. It took Instagram only 2.5 months to get to 1 million users. It took ChatGPT 5 days. And as we record this webinar, ChatGPT already has over 100 million active weekly users. So the speed at which these are getting adopted is so much faster than anything else that it really means a lot of our traditional business processes are not going to be fast enough to keep up. So that's a thing we're talking a lot about. We're encouraging brands to think about doing things differently than they've ever done before to react to this incredible new pace of change. The quote that's always bouncing around in my head that terrifies me is the pace of change has never been this fast before, and it's never going to be this slow again. And so that, surviving and thriving in that environment is going to be a real challenge. If we go to the next slide, I want to leave us with a definition. I feel like we keep getting tangled up in these definitions, and there's lots of smart people that are saying, hey, agentic commerce is overhyped, it's not such a big deal, and other people are like, it's the biggest thing since sliced bread. And when you really dig into it, it's because they're defining agentic commerce differently, right? And so the people that are saying it's not a huge deal are the people that are saying level 5 agentic commerce, where we only count the transaction if the robot took the money and a human wasn't involved, is a long way off. It's not economically meaningful today. But if those people that are saying it's a huge deal today are pointing out the 50 million times a day people go to ChatGPT and ask for advice on buying something. The discovery is already happening in huge quantities on these systems, and particularly these vertical agents today, discovery is happening quite a bit, as we're about to see. So I encourage everyone to have a broad definition of agentic commerce. That's what we work on here at Publicis Commerce, that we think about the agent's role in discovery as well as purchase being a critical and valid use case of agentic commerce. And I'm going to leave you with one final piece of advice on how to deal with all of this. If we go to the next slide, The key is not to think about the tactics, right? We're going to talk about some of those tactics. Those tactics are important. Things like showing up in the vertical agents, showing up in the horizontal agents. We call that generative engine optimization, for example. That's a totally valid tactic, and you should be doing it. That's not enough. What you really need to think about is one level more strategic, which we call agentic commerce optimization. What's your overall strategy for dealing with these robots? What's your strategy on trust? What's your strategy on transparency and monetization? What's your strategy on partnering with the horizontal versus the vertical agents? Are you blocking the horizontal agents, or are you sending data to the horizontal agents? These are all the things that we have to answer as we move forward in this new space. I don't know how to do all this, but I've tried to learn from some great leaders in our industry. If you go to the next slide, one of the most phenomenal leaders in our industry in my lifetime has been Doug McMillon, who's the recently retired CEO of Walmart. I'm not bitter at all that he's retired, and he's 2 months younger than I am. That doesn't sting at all, I promise. But a fun fact about Doug: about 2 years ago in meetings, Doug adopted a new practice that we had never seen before. He came to a meeting. It's a big deal to come to a meeting with Doug. Everyone prepares quite a bit in advance, and Doug sits down at the beginning of the meeting and says, "Hey, thank you guys all very much. I'm super excited to have this conversation. But before we get started, I have one question for you. How'd you all use AI to prepare for this meeting?" And you could hear a pin drop, right? Everybody's face fell because, of course, 2 years ago at Walmart, no one was using agents to prepare for meetings. No one was using AI. And so it was very quiet for a few moments. And then one brave soul chimed in and said, "Doug, I'm really sorry. We didn't use AI to prepare for this meeting," which is objectively true. But then he dropped the funny bomb. He waited a second and said, "AI is illegal at Walmart." And think about it. Doug's like, what are you talking about? AI is not illegal at Walmart. And he's like, "Oh, no. We get emails every day, every week. The robots hallucinate, the data leaks. We don't have licenses for all these things. You should not be using AI at Walmart," right? And, Doug said, "Oh my God, we have to fix this," right? And think about what he did over 2 years. He bought ChatGPT for 1.6 million Walmart associates. Then he found out that the other bots were better in any given month, so he bought all the bots. Then he started inventing bots like Sparky and Marty and at Walmart. And eventually, Walmart became a leader in AI. He hired Dan Danker as an S-level executive reporting to the CEO of Walmart, exclusively focused on agentic commerce. And since they're a public company and their salaries are all public, I can tell you Dan Danker gets paid more than Doug McMillon paid himself at Walmart. So they really leaned into agentic over 2 years, and they're really having a great outcome as a result of it. And I think we can all learn from this strategy of Doug being a change agent and giving his employees and his partners a permission to do their jobs differently tomorrow than they did it yesterday, which is exactly what we need to do in this sort of rapidly evolving new agentic space. So that's sort of how I think about the whole space. I'm obviously super excited about this. We're happy to discuss it further. But apparently I'm legally obligated to have all of this information fact-checked. And so we brought the much smarter and more talented Julia Miller on to maybe fix whatever I got wrong and talk specifically about what brands should be doing right now as a result of all this. So Julia, help us out.
Awesome. Jason, thank you. Always a tough act to follow. So I'm going to talk to you about a lot of the conversations we've been having with clients and brands recently. And the first one here, just to start, is we've in the past talked a lot about just like, how do you show up? And just like Jason mentioned, what does that visibility look like? But more recently, the conversation has changed. And it's gone to how do you actually redesign your commerce model so that you're winning? And if you flip to the next slide, we're first actually going to start with the showing up. So one of the acronyms that we've coined, and Ethan will talk to you more about it, is SOAR, and that's share of agent recommendations. So essentially, how prominent is your brand in those conversations with answer engines? If you go to the next slide here, there's a few different ways in. And this is something that we've had a lot of conversations with brands in. The first is, it's been around for years. So retail readiness. And you think, Jason talked to you about all of these trust signals, like, are you in stock? Are you available? Are you getting good ratings and reviews? all of the fundamentals of doing retail the right way is hugely important in this new world. So that's one pillar that you can't ignore. The next one is content. And I think a lot of people know, yeah, like you need to go out there, you need to make sure that your PDPs are enhanced. You need to have the right content on your brand site. You need to be out there on Reddit and working on social and influencers and all of that. And like that's table stakes. A lot of people know, but I think the other angle on content is how do you start to bring that culture together and seasonality into all of the different touch points? The third one here, this is also an earned touch point, but catalog. And this is one when we talk to clients, there is less awareness of. And I'd say, it's essentially making sure that all of these enhanced, rich contextual attribute fields that are relatively on the newer side and certainly not required when you're setting up a new item, that you are populating those. And that is going to help you be part of the conversations around lifestyle and occasion and what people are actually searching for. And then the last one here, we get a lot of this. It's like, can you just pay for it? Like, hey, I've got a media budget, so I want to pay to show up. I want to pay to be the number one ranked item. Now, we'll get into more of what that means, but yes, of course. I mean, Jason just showed you some of the ad formats, but the fundamental of trust is still so important that you can't break that and you can't just be the sponsored result because people aren't going to come back. So if you go to the next slide, this is where we get into, okay, sure, we need to make sure that you're showing up, but we really need to make sure that you're winning. So how do you flip that operating model? And we like to look at things with the lens of commerce with the 4 shelves. So this is increasingly converging, and more of the challenger brands have these mindsets where they're like, oh, I'm going to make like this quick change and I'm scrappy and I'm able to identify something that, people are discovering a new trend on social or TikTok shop. And I'm going to be able to pull that through to maybe my packaging or digital content and all of that. And this is something that is happening so fast. But if you flip one more, the difference here is now you've got a different, you've got the robot and you've got the, and the human, but they have different shopping journeys, and they each have different journeys because sometimes the human will bring the robot along with them if they're coming in through the agentic shelf, but they may not if they're at the physical shelf. And that's still where a big portion of the sales are happening. So we need to keep both of these audiences in mind as we're planning out what does this experience look like for them. Now you can go ahead, move forward one, and just 5 things that we want to point out for you to know as, where everything is changing. And this is probably in a couple of weeks, there's going to be something new that we can bring to the table. But if you flip to the first trend we wanted to highlight, it's, what are the robots eating? What type of data are they looking for? So click again here, and we've done a lot of, we've done pilots, we've done research, we've done audits, we've done all of these different types of quantitative tests. But essentially it comes down to humans are very visual and very, like, if you think you're going to a product page and you see some beautiful lifestyle imagery, that's attracting you to things. And you have more curated content that humans are looking for. Whereas the robots, they'd rather see a 200-page PDF with all of the tech specs. And you go into the catalog. So like for this one, if let's say somebody was looking for a protein pasta salad they could bring to a barbecue, the robots are going to look at, what type of dietary attributes and are there some different usage occasions? They'll look into the nutritional facts. And these are the things that humans could look for, but it's going to be so time consuming that we need to make sure that as we're putting this story together, that we're looking at both audiences. If you click to the next trend, another one we wanted to bring to life was how has prompt monitoring really changed? And we know, as Jason also mentioned, GEO, a lot of our clients are out there and they know the importance. You can flip one more. They know the importance of looking at prompts and monitoring them, but a lot of these are being treated very much as an evolution of SEO. And it's like, all right, I'm going to look for my product, my brand name. I'm going to look at the category. I'm going to look at some of the competitors. But really what it's doing is you're missing a huge part of the conversation. So we did a study here that was actually looking at the top 25 product or prompts that a candy brand was able to monitor. And what we went out, we looked at what their audience was, we went into social, we looked at what are the conversations that are happening both in the social space as well as seasonality. And we were able to identify, of those 25 prompts, 20 of them would not have even showed up if you were just looking at, what's the best candy, what's the best product. A lot of them are like, hey, well, what's the candy that I can bring to a pool party, or what's something that's trending on TikTok? And like, again, very seasonal lifestyle. So the blind spot here is not about brand awareness. It's about occasion awareness. And if you're not bringing those occasions and the shopper need state into what you're actually monitoring, then you're missing a lot of these different cues. If you want to go to the third trend here we wanted to bring to life is essentially the evolution of search. So, if you think through retail search and, in this example here, just searching for paper plates, and you could see it's going to be very keyword based. When you move to digital shelf optimization, this starts to get into, let's make sure that your product pages are complete and you have all of the right, you've got the bullets, the A+ content, you've got all of these filled out, and it is accurate. Everything is complete. You're not missing anything. When you start to get into agentic, this is where you're going to need so much more data. And so using that same type of query, and this, now we actually searched for what are paper plates that we could bring to a backyard barbecue. And what was really interesting is what showed up here was actually private label. And the reasoning for this is if you actually go in and you start to look at the different attributes that they're putting in their catalog, as well as how they're enhancing their PDPs, they know that to win this game, you need to show up. And they're doing all of these. So you think through private label, like, yeah, you always have to compete with them in the digital shelf. You've competed with them in the physical store. Now you're competing with them in the agentic shelf. And if you're not doing all of these enhancements and all these attributes, they are. So they've got pool party in there. They've got backyard barbecue. They've got, like, you name it. And it's not just keyword stuffing, because it also needs to earn the trust of the agents. So it's this balance, like, think through the retail readiness. They know it's in stock. They know it has the right pricing. So they can be sure that they would recommend this product to you and they're going to get a sale. The only other stat I wanted to point out here is there was an Adobe study recently that starts talking about this evolution of content and the data needs underneath it. So now we're in this world where you'll need 5 times more data to support this shelf than you did on the digital shelf, which just gets into, like, wow, there's so much data, and all of the lifestyle occasion, the context behind it is going to be an exercise that a lot of clients don't have handy, but are starting to go through and start to populate. If you go to the next trend here, what we wanted to also bring to life is the notion of PDPs as the new POS. So if you click on here, what we mean by this is it shouldn't be a one-time set and forget. So if you launch a product, it should not just be oh, great, like, it's up there, it's complete. I don't have to touch it until we have a packaging change, or I have, like, whatever it is that I need to put a new claim or legal or something like that. No, what you should really be thinking about is there's a reason people are going to your PDP. If it's coming from retail media, if it's coming from the answer engines or whatever it is, but they need to make sure that it's in touch with what their shopper need is and the mindset there. So there's a seasonal play. There could be an occasion, like maybe it's movie night, or maybe they're going out and they're trying to figure out a new trend that they found on TikTok. They're trying to find how can they recreate it or be part of that moment. So all of these different things means these need to be more of a dynamic PDP versus just a static set and forget. And those brands who are actually thinking of it as, let's rotate out, it could be just a light lift, maybe quarterly, or maybe there's some sort of trends update. You're going to start to win because you're part of that larger conversation. And the last trend here, and this kind of goes back to what Jason had kind of closed with in terms of how do all these LLMs monetize this new surface that people are using without breaking the trust. So if you click on the next one, this is just an example that we use when you're thinking through those vertical agents that are out there. One of the betas that we ran, and this is just like a seasonal holiday recap, but one that was really prominent was popping that 3.5 times the number of people who are using these answer engines are converting. So the reason that we're bringing this up is a lot of the betas are actually getting people into the answer engine. So you'll think like there's a sponsored pill on Alexa, and you click on it and it gets you deeper into Alexa for shopping. So all of these guys know you need to get into the answer engine so that you convert higher. But if you flip to the next one, what was really interesting about this is it's not a one size fits all. So there are going to be some people, and in this study, it was called an early decider, that they only asked one question, they had one follow-up. So a total of 2 back and forths, and they were able to check out that, like, great, they found what they needed. Maybe it was a price point for them. Then you've got a more extreme, the research conversationalist. And for these guys, like, they need a ton of data and context about the usage occasions, and they're going back and forth 13 times. They spent 150 minutes with the answer engine before they actually checked out. So again, your category is going to be different, your brand, the need state, like all of these things, but you need to take them into consideration and know that if you're not putting all of this data, catalog, content, you name it, then you're not going to be part of the conversations, because if they're going to, the humans, the agents, they'll start asking the questions, they're going to keep on going, but you need to be that number one decision and number one ranked product so that you're not just visible, but you're actually the recommendation. So that's all I've got for you today with the trend section. And now I'm going to hand it off to Tyler to take you through the next section.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. I love what you were talking about just now, how shoppers may use the same agent in very different ways. And it leads right into, well, there's just so much to figure out. What do we do as a brand? How do brands actually win inside these environments? And the short answer, and Julia, you just said it, blanket optimization, it doesn't really work. And so the answer is context. Context wins. And that's because the robots are not just ranking products, they're dynamically interpreting shopper intent, basket context, price sensitivity, moment specific relevance. So the question is no longer just, well, how do I show up more? It's how do I become the right answer for this very specific shopper moment? And on the next slide, you'll see this sort of left and right, if you will, the traditional e-commerce journey where the optimization mindset was often broad. Improve content, expand keyword coverage, increase visibility, drive more traffic. That logic, it still matters, but it's no longer sufficient on its own. Increasingly, the first shelf the shopper comes across is the agentic shelf. It won't always be a sea of search results. And so there will be the shift, and it's already happening, from the consideration of search results, looking all through the different PDPs and comparing all of these different offerings, eventually adding to cart and converting, to a guided recommendation moment. Discovery is becoming conversational, comparative, and contextual. And if your product cannot be discovered, it can't be chosen. And that's all because there's this intermediary, the agent, the robot, interpreting the shopper's needs and bringing back those recommendations. So success now comes from specificity. You have to optimize the right products for the right queries, because agentic environments do not respond well to a one-size-fits-all approach. And if discover is happening earlier and more conversationally, the next question is, well, what actually gets rewarded? On the next slide, you'll see that in our work, we see that recommendation is shaped by certainly more than keywords, although keywords are certainly a part of the recommendations. It's a combination of different elements and signals, which we've softly introduced and call our 5Cs or GEOC5. Agents or robots are influenced by whether the product is clearly described, whether it matches the shopper language, whether it fits the use case, and whether the surrounding attributes support that choice. It rewards relevance, clarity, and, you guessed it, contextual fit. The product has to be clear, credible, and appropriate to the query at hand. All of this has to be clear to the robot and the shopper, because even if the robot chooses the product, the shopper still has to convert. It's not one or the other. So let's go ahead and do double click and see what that looks like on the next slide. This is product A, and I want you to trust me. Product A is very popular. It's high converting, and you guessed it as well, it's a high converting product for brand A. Well, in traditional SEO, it's either ranking very highly organically or it's being supported by paid search for those harder to win priority keywords. but despite its popularity, it still needs to meet the criteria of our 5 Cs. Why is that? Different prompts imply different decision criteria. Shopper intent, query specificity, budget, urgency, basket context, pricing thresholds, confidence level, household need, the willingness to trade up, trade over. These are all things that shoppers may be thinking about. It may be impacting their journey as they're sifting through all these different options. So winning in this space is becoming increasingly situational. So for example, we've been doing a lot of test and learns around Sparky. And for a health and beauty brand, we tried to optimize one popular product for a series of different high value prompts to see what we could or couldn't influence. And for a particular set of prompts, which a few of them could be classified in that second row, the specific need bucket on your screen, Sparky instituted a price threshold. It simply wouldn't show products above a certain price point, meaning we were priced out. Our product wouldn't show for those prompts. So should we just not bother optimizing at all? No, of course not. That's not at all what I'm saying. Because for a different set of prompts, it did start showing as a recommended product after we optimized the PDP. Price was just less of a factor. So what does this tell us? It tells us we have to be very intentional about which products in a brand's catalog we're choosing to optimize for different queries, because price and yes, bestseller status as well can influence what gets surfaced alongside content and reviews. This is exactly why a blanket one-size-fits-all approach does not work. So the next practical question becomes, what do we do? And on the next slide, you're going to see that the playing field, it's changed. We're by no means are we saying, though, to throw out the playbook. The playbook you have, it's good. Please don't throw it away. We just want you to evolve it. And on the next slide, you'll see some of the beginnings of what we mean by that. In agentic environments, fundamentals are interpreted through context. And so what you're doing today is very, very important. In so many ways, it's feeding the recommendations that are already happening. Those fundamentals are critical. So this is not an either or, but a plus up. Keep up with your paid search. Keep up with your SEO strategies, your offsite, onsite media. Don't sacrifice today to win tomorrow. But trust cannot simply be purchased. And agentic systems reward relevance, clarity, and again, if you got on your bingo card, contextual fit. You don't have to rebuild everything overnight. That's not what we're saying you have to do at all, but you do have to be flexible, agile, willing to start making these changes now to better set you up for an agentic future. The winning product is no longer just the best merchandise product. It's the product that best fits the mission that the agent believes the shopper is on. So if you're going to do that, you have to start with 3 questions, which you'll see on the next slide. Start with the products that matter to your business. What's driving your business? Then map the prompts and context that genuinely fit those products. And remember, you have that robot interpreter who's going to be signing off on whatever you're trying to optimize for before it gets to the shopper. Then optimize where those recommendations make the most sense. Bring in that context, create that credibility and trust. This is not about winning every prompt. It's not about winning the queries or prompts with the highest volume. It's about deciding which products are relevant for the queries and then optimizing those PDPs to win. The brands that win here won't optimize for everything. They'll prioritize the right moments, the right queries, the right products, and then they're going to learn faster than everyone else. The winners are likely to be the willing learners, the willing adapters, the folks who are agile, like I said, and who are not afraid to embrace a lot of change. Now, I'll admit, that's hard to do without 2 things: data and measurement. And that's why I'm very glad Ethan is coming up next. Ethan, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. I'm going to bring us home. As you said, it was a great segue. My role is to, and as it says here, move us from theory to practice. And like Peter said at the very beginning in the intro, ultimately to validate the really smart thinking and actionable approaches that you and Jason and Julia have shared. And I'm going to do that with data and tools. So specifically, I'm going to review some research that is, you can see here on the title screen, is unfortunately titled Decoding Rufus. We co-published this research at Profitero with our friends at Mars United Commerce and Publicis Commerce before Amazon rebranded Rufus to Alexa Plus or Alexa for Shopping or whatever they're calling it. But in any event, so I'm going to share that the key findings from that research, that we co-published again with Mars and Publicis Commerce and in partnership with some of our key clients. And then I'm also going to share a really exciting product announcement about a solution at Profitero that I think will be really valuable to brands as we look to continue to measure this activity going forward. Before I do that and jump into the research, again, just maybe a little bit of regrounding, if you will. Like we talked about, if it wasn't hard enough already as marketers, where we need to think about optimizing for the consumer and creating emotion, we need to think about optimizing for the search algorithm to make sure that we continue to improve traditional SEO. Now we need to optimize for the robot and for AEO. When we go to the next slide, a big part of the reason that this is important, apart from all the really important context and information that that Jason and Julia and Tyler shared, is because the real estate for our clients' brands to be in the consideration set when they're using AI search engines, or when they're using the robots to along their purchase journey in order to make decisions, the real estate is considerably smaller than it is in some of these other environments and contexts. If you think about a physical store shelf, you've got about 200 to 500 items on that planogram, depending on how we define the section. We think about the traditional digital shelf and endless aisle. In many cases, there are 100,000 plus items on that shelf. And even on a first page of search results on a platform like Amazon or Walmart, we're talking about somewhere between 10 and 60 results. 8 items on average are recommended by an AI agent during an LLM search. And so again, really important to make sure that we're optimized so that we're showing up in those first eight slots. I think it was the illustrious Ricky Bobby who said, "If you're not first, you're last." And I think that axiom is looking to hold true in this agentic commerce world. So again, without further ado, if that's the environment that we're operating within, the key question then becomes, how can brands prepare for agentic commerce optimization? And as I said, we at Profitero, in partnership with Mars United and a handful of our key clients, we set out to answer this question with some hard data and some valuable insight. So we ended up again studying the impact of AEO on Rufus specifically. We picked Rufus, now Alexa, and the Amazon platform, and a vertical LLM or AI search engine, mostly because it's important to our clients. It's big and growing. We've heard Amazon report that they have 300 plus million users on a monthly basis. And also that the users are 60% more likely to buy products that are recommended by Rufus. So this felt like a big, important opportunity that we should study and that we should validate with data. So as we move to the next slide here, in conducting the research, we set out to answer 3 core questions. Can Rufus be influenced simply by updating content? If so, what conditions must be met for content optimization to work? And thirdly, what impact does Rufus optimization have on traffic, conversion, and sales? And again, a lot of the research, and again, you'll start to see in some of the use cases. One of those core KPIs for us, as Julia talked about earlier, was SOAR, share of agent recommendations. So as we move forward here, again, to answer that first basic question, which is, can Rufus be influenced simply by updating content? I think that the best way that I can put it is yes, but. So what we identified was this 2-stage model for AI visibility and optimization. The first component of that is eligibility, and the second is optimization. And effectively what this means here is that there's a certain threshold for eligibility that brands and products need to meet in order to be recommended, by Rufus. And I'll decompose that in just a second. And then once brands and products have met that threshold for eligibility, And again, they've gotten to a place where Rufus will even consider recommending them. Then where they show up within those recommendations, within that top 8, that can be influenced by optimizing content. So if we roll forward here, this first bit about eligibility, the specific components of that based on the research that we conducted are what you see here. So Rufus loves an established winner or an established bestseller. So products we studied with the highest share of agent recommendations had, as you can see here, 2.5 times greater best-selling rank, 15,000 or more reviews, and a 4.6 average star ranking. So again, it's the bestseller criteria as well as the highly rated and reviewed criteria that are helping brands and products reach that eligibility threshold. And then again, if you flip to the next slide here, once the brand or product has met that eligibility threshold, once Rufus has determined this brand is a bestseller, this brand is highly rated and reviewed, and we Rufus, or I Rufus, believe that this brand and product has credibility with customers, then again we can begin to optimize content in order to enhance the placement within that recommendation. And specifically here, again, I think as Julia and Tyler have covered really eloquently, the way that we think about optimizing product content on PDPs and on backend keywords and attributes for SEO and AEO is similar in some regard, but also different in some nuanced ways. So again, as you can see here, from an SEO perspective, there's a much more impactful focus on keywords. And then when we get into the AEO, GEO realm, we start to talk about intent, and we talk about specific use cases. Julia mentioned seasonality, intent polls, and other semantic information that we can start to use to optimize our PDPs in order to enhance that share of agent recommendation. So we've got a handful of case studies here. Again, we worked with a number of different clients across categories to test some of these hypotheses and see how they bared out. On the left here, again, and I think this was probably the most common finding when we made content optimizations to, I'll call them highly eligible products. A lot of the times what we found is when we were making those content optimizations to enhance AEO, GEO, that we were seeing a parallel increase in both SOAR, so share of agent recommendation. So we make these content changes, the brand or the products rank within the AEO results increases. And then we saw a corresponding increase in sales like we did on Nature's Bakery. There were some cases where we made these tweaks. We actually didn't see an increase in SOAR, but we did see a corresponding increase in sales. And again, I think that gets back to this notion that a lot of the fundamentals for optimizing SEO and AEO, GEO are similar. So in the case of Sellstrom, this is an example where we didn't see a material increase in SOAR, but we did see a material increase after we made the optimizations in SEO rank. And again, we saw a corresponding lift in sales there. And then, just another case study to round it out here. This is Revelist. They make a best-in-class golf range finder with GPS capabilities. And again, this is an example where we made some pretty substantial changes to the copy on the PDP as well as to the backend keywords and attributes to address specific use cases related to some of the prompts that we were testing. And again, we saw in doing that, we saw a really substantial increase in SOAR as well as in average daily total unit sales. So I think what I would end with here before we get into this brief product announcement that I teased at the beginning is that winning on Rufus doesn't mean anything if you're not winning on the digital shelf basics. So again, I think as was illustrated in that Sellstrom case study, if you nail the basics, and you prioritize your next best actions. Once you've kind of nailed, again, some of those basic eligibility criteria, that's when you can move on to Rufus. You can enhance content optimization for AEO, GEO, and really start to move the needle and get that flywheel working. So that will put a cap on the research. And then I'll finish again with just a brief product announcement here from Profitero. And again, I think the reason in doing this, apart from maybe seeming somewhat salesy, is that we believe that we've got a tool that can help brands measure quantitatively the actions that they're taking, much like we just talked about in the research, and again, measure the impact of some of the approaches that Julia and Tyler and Jason talked about. So Profitero, for the last 2 years, has had a tool in market called the Content Optimizer. This is a tool that helps brands optimize their PDP content across key platforms like Amazon, Walmart, Target in the United States, as the Boots and Sainsbury in the UK and elsewhere across Europe. So Content Optimizer is this base content optimization tool. And then the new news here, if you roll forward, is that within the last month, we've released a new feature inside of Content Optimizer called AEO mode that helps brands to assess and fix their content, not just for SEO like base Content Optimizer, but for agentic search. And you can see some of the key capabilities and functionalities down below that I'm going to click into really briefly here in the subsequent slides. So the first capability here is the ability to quickly identify which products need to be optimized with AEO priorities and star where we want to take first actions. So that's the first capability. The second, as we roll forward here, is we've created a key recommendation table where we're going to see the AEO-centric recommendations with rationale for why we're recommending the changes and optimizations that we're recommending. And then lastly here, a really unique feature, the ability to, on the fly, use AI to again, not just to make the recommended optimizations, but to show us side by side a comparison of where we've made the changes, and then enable the user to decide whether they want to push those to Salsify or whether they want to hold those back. So that's the new news on Content Optimizer. And then again, I think just to wrap here before I hand it over to Peter to get us into a Q&A, again, if you thought about a framework for how we get ahead of the shift to AI shopping, it starts with identifying, your primary goals, that North Star KPI, be it SOAR or sales or whatever it is. And then from there, assess the opportunity, your competitors, develop your strategy, activate and optimize, and ultimately measure and learn and start that loop all over again. So with that, as I said, I'll pass it back to Peter and we can jump into the Q&A.
Thank you, Ethan and Tyler and Julia and Jason. A lot of great information, some great perspectives on what's happening out there. Probably more importantly, some actionable information on how you can all respond to what's happening out there. We've got a few questions that we had planned, so we'll jump right into those. Jason, we're going to start with you. You mentioned the latest game-changing announcement from Google last week. What should brands be doing right now to respond directly to what Google is now doing?
Yeah, great question, Peter. And the short answer is become good friends with the Google Merchant Center. So the Google Merchant Center is a set of tooling that Google has set up that manages all of their product information and all of their commerce features, including now all of these instant checkout features. So heretofore, I talked to a lot of brands that either didn't avail themselves of the Merchant Center or weren't aware of the Merchant Center because they felt like it was a tool for people that were actually selling on Google, which it is that. But it's an important tool even if you're not selling on Google. It's your interface to share all of your product content and all of your context and your storytelling with Google so that it shows up in all of the surfaces that Google is going to be launching for this new instant checkout feature, which is, of course, search, it's AI summaries, But it also is things like YouTube. So for sure, if you're not already an advanced user of Merchant Center, you absolutely need to get yourself a seat there and start familiarizing yourself there. That's also the first place you're going to find out about all these new features. So that's what I would suggest as step one.
Okay, great. Julia, we'll come to you next. A lot of things that brands can be doing and should be doing. You can't do everything all at once. Where can a brand realistically start?
Yeah, yeah. Because we talked about so many different things, and I feel like there's a lot that was thrown out at the crowd. I'd say like the number one thing is you can't start with every single SKU. And I think that's an easy one that you're just like, wow, I have a lot in front of me. But when you're trying to understand and how to navigate this, let's start with where you have the most opportunity to win. So start looking through some of those like the really relevant moments. What type of shopper mission do you want to win, and do you already have some credibility there? So like an example is we work with a skincare brand, and one of the moments they wanted to win was beach day. Now naturally that's going to be like sunblock, of course, like that makes sense, but are there routines that they can start instilling on some of their adjacent brands? So one of the prompts that came up was around like, what moisturizer should I wear before applying sunblock? So that starts to say like, oh, I want to own beach day. And that may be like the moment, the cultural moment that you want to win. But how do you start to then narrow in on the products that you have in your portfolio around them? So again, like start small. I don't think you have to necessarily pick one like product category, but like really trying to understand the context around it before you dig in.
Okay. Tyler, we'll come to you next. And I guess this is kind of like the flip side question. But what should brands not be doing now, or what should they stop doing now to move ahead?
Yeah, and I don't want this to come off as harsh, but I think the first thing is stop mistaking activity for readiness. A common response that we're seeing is just trying to do more, and I mean more everywhere, more content, more optimization, more testing, more AI language layered into everything. I get it. I'm sure we all get it. I think it was Jason who said that the pace of change is maybe the fastest it's ever been. So there's an instinct to just scale effort, just do as much as we possibly can. But that's not the same thing as building an advantage. So to sort of build on that very quickly, stop assuming every product in the catalog needs to be optimized the same way. Julia just brought up a great example of what working towards a moment or owning a event feels like. And so different products play different roles depending on the query, the use case, the shopper's intent. And then finally, I think stop chasing visibility without being clear on why that product should win in the moment. We oftentimes will say, feel the answer, win the shopper. And so just showing up, it's not the same thing as being the right answer. That's a very different way of thinking about this space versus visibility. And so that should be the goal. The distinction matters in terms of being the right answer, not just a answer, because now it's a conversation. Discovery is a conversation.
Okay, awesome. Ethan, you next. We talked about horizontal agents versus vertical agents. Which type of agent do you think is going to win, and how should brands be planning differently for one versus the other, if at all?
I hate to be the guy that says both, but both. I think the scale will, of ChatGPT, for example, is 900 million weekly users. I just said a couple of minutes ago that Amazon's reporting that they've got 300 plus million users on the Rufus platform or the Alexa Plus platform. So I think that the scale is going to require the brand show up in both of those places, and it's not just ChatGPT and Rufus. It's Claude and it's Perplexity and it's Sparky and it's all the other vertical agents that we know are coming. And I also think that there's some truth to, Jason talked about what Andy Jassy said about the value of of Rufus and more broadly these vertical agents. These are still the biggest shopping platforms in the world. These are still the places that shoppers are going to go to start their journeys, to build awareness, consideration, to move all the way to transaction. So I do think it's going to be important for brands to win with both vertical. Let me try that again. horizontal and vertical agents. I want to get the hand gestures right. And then I think the good news though is that I teased this a little bit during my session. Largely speaking, the things that brands need to do to optimize for horizontal and vertical agents are the same. There are some nuances for sure. Like across the horizontal agents, are brands going to need to make sure that they're improving their citations on Reddit and across social platforms, so on and so forth? Yes, because those are the places that the horizontal agents are. I think Julia said that's where they're getting fed from. But I would say that generally things like product content on PDPs, those are places that both vertical and horizontal agents are going to be grabbing from as well. And so optimizing for both horizontal and vertical is not going to require brands to do different things wholesale. I think that, again, if they get the fundamentals right, they'll be well positioned to win in both those environments.
Okay. And then we wanted to finish things off with you, Jason. I said at the top that no one's really sure what the future is going to bring, but we still kind of wanted to send you out on a limb anyway, and ask you, will consumers ever really trust the robots to take over their purchase decisions?
Yeah, well, I totally learned from Ethan. The answer is always both, and that this now explains how he won our March Madness bracket, because I think he entered 4 brackets with all 4 number 1 seeds. But we'll set that aside and just say the real answer is I don't know. The reality is my spidey sense goes up every time someone tells me no one will ever do X, right? And again, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in the boardroom when everyone's like, no one's ever going to buy TVs online. I've been in the boardroom when someone said no one's ever going to buy apparel online, when no one's ever going to buy Williams-Sonoma tabletop online. No one's ever going to buy a car online. And all of these, nobody's ever going to do things, have all, of course, come to pass. And so, to me, I think there is going to come a time when the agents have a lot of autonomy and are solving a lot of purchases for us. In the long run, they for sure are. In the long run, hopefully we're all retired and long since stopped worrying about it as well. So in the short run, I think Julia gave us the real answer, which is it's going to totally be dependent on the product category and the context, right? That, we're probably going to use the agents to help us do our research for a lot of considered purchases like that car. I think we're all going to jump at the chance to never run out of toilet paper again and just, outsource that duty to the robot. So I that's how I think about it.
Okay, good enough. That'll wrap things up for now. Thanks again to this amazing panel, Julia Miller, Jason Goldberg, Tyler Rosten, Ethan Goodman, for all of the great insights that you shared with us today. We hope you're walking away with a better understanding of the impact that agentic AI is having on your business and what you can do about it right now. We're hosting these webinars because we truly do believe that Publicis Commerce is uniquely suited to helping you solve the problems that you're now facing. You've already heard about Content Optimizer at Profitero Plus as one of those tools. We've got a lot more. We can take you all the way from enterprise education and strategic planning right down to content development and optimization and measurement. If you'd like to learn more about any of those, we'd be happy to tell you. All you have to do is click on the button that you'll see below the video on the page here and fill out the form that you get sent to. Or, as I said earlier, if you've got that burning question that we didn't perhaps answer today, fill out that form and we'll have somebody who really knows what they're talking about get back to you and help you with whatever you need. If you'd like to check out some of the other thought leadership that we've released recently, scan the QR code right here on this slide. You'll get to that Decoding Rufus or Alexa for Shopping report that Ethan talked about. We've got a study on consumer behavior on horizontal agents that we conducted with eMarketer. Whole lot of other related content as well too. Finally, we're already planning the next Agentic Commerce Now webinar. It's a topic we touched on today. Jason spoke about it a little bit. It's growing and evolving quickly, and we really need to kind of drill down into it as soon as we can. And that, of course, is paid advertising. So you'll be getting more information about that very soon. Thanks for giving us a little bit of your time, and we hope to see you again real soon.